All righty. All right, good afternoon, everyone. We are going to call our January 20th work session to order. And the first item on the agenda is the curriculum procurement process from academics. So we'll welcome Dr. Hill and Doctors Hill and King and Mr. Johnson. Dr. Johnson, excuse me. Good afternoon, you all.
Testing. Fantastic. Okay. We want to bring this presentation regarding our curriculum procurement process. Today's presentation will be an overview, an update on the district's curriculum review and procurement process. Our team has, in fact, engaged in a reflective review of this process, drawing on that input and practices from other large school districts to identify opportunities for enhancement, thank you, Lisa, to the process. Today, we will share highlights of how that reflection has, in fact, strengthened our approach to instructional alignment, stakeholder engagement, and long-term planning. When we examine our desired outcomes, we want to review what we have established as our procurement process, then in fact clarify the impact of where we are in alignment to DPI's standards revision timeline, revisit and define our district strategic approach for our 2025-2027 installation phase 4 English language arts, and then share the process for gap analysis, resource review, and align with any curriculum procurement process professional learning. This work is about coherence, ensuring that curriculum, standards, assessment, and professional learning are all in alignment and intentionally with that alignment. Our goal is to make sure that our process supports strong instruction while being thoughtful about capacity of our stakeholders at the building level, the timing, and also sustainability. Dr. King is going to lead us now in those pieces, so we can examine this process even further.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to share with you. The curriculum procurement process is grounded in our board policy as well as our strategic plan. There's an emphasis on standard alignment, equity, stakeholder engagement, as well as our fiscal responsibility. The enhancements we're going to share today strengthen how consistently these expectations are applied across content areas. The learning model is our framework for teaching and learning. So when we talk about curriculum procurement, we often think about textbooks or software, but truly, we are talking about the instructional core. Our focus right now is ensuring that our teachers have the tools to facilitate the standards-aligned instruction you see in this model. Sometimes that requires a new product, but often it requires better alignment of what we already have. Therefore, the learning model serves as our instructional anchor and decision filter, whether we adapt existing resources, supplement current materials, or consider new ones. This ensures that classroom practice, instructional rigor, and student learning needs remain the driving force behind our decisions. As part of this work, we reflected on prior curriculum implementation experiences. Key lessons emerged in that reflection: the need for clearer communication, stronger alignment to long-term budget planning, sufficient planning, vendor engagement, adjustment time to those new standards for our students and staff, as well as how we integrate technology. These lessons helped shape a process that better supports our schools and avoids rushed or fragmented implementation. Those lessons also directly inform the enhancements to our curriculum review and procurement process that our district has. Enhancements include stronger strategic alignment, expanded educator and stakeholder engagement, additional opportunities such as roadshows and vendor presentations, and improved long-term planning tied to the DPI timelines as well as our budget priorities. Together, these changes improve transparency and instructional coherence across our district. Now we're going to transition to the overview of the district's curriculum review and procurement process. Again, this is an existing process that we have had that has been enhanced, not replaced, to improve clarity, consistency, and transparency. This slide details the most critical update, which is from the Department of Instruction, and it impacts our process and the information on our standards review and the revision timeline that you may remember from last year. DPI has shifted to a model that gives a school district a 2-year installation window to prepare for new standards. Our curriculum procurement process begins when the State Board of Education releases new or revised standards. Once these standards are adopted, our district's curriculum committee springs into action. The process is organized into 6 phases, beginning with a needs assessment and culminating with ongoing implementation and review. Across all the phases, there are clear guardrails. No phase advances without evidence, stakeholder input occurs throughout, and professional learning is embedded rather than added later. Just a couple of details if we look at the phases more closely. For example, Phase 0 focuses on strategic planning and budget assessment, where we gather data, explore curriculum options, and align educational goals with our resources. Phase 1, that's where we identify our instructional priorities and engage our educators, students, and parents. We also assess the effectiveness of our current curriculum. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of some detail about that. And let's dig a little deeper. I shared with you that DPI has an updated standards revision timeline. As you can see on this slide, it says January 2026 to June 2027. Last week, our state board did approve ELA standards. So it is now time for us, our district, our committee, to spring into action using our 6 phases so that we can determine how we're going to make sure that our teachers are ready to implement the new standards in ELA come July 2027. I also would like to point out at this point that you just heard me say that the new timeline gives you 2 years. But for ELA, we have 1.5 years, and then the other content areas, there will be 2 full years. So with this slide, there's a timeline illustrating the process and key activities we will undertake in response to the revised ELA standards. We're only starting with it first because it's the first one in our sequence. And I want to be able to just share with you how we're going to align with the process. So, using ELA as the example, we're going to start now. We're going to establish clarity by confirming what our instructional priorities that are tied to the revised standards, what they are. We're going to set up what our budget parameters are, and we as a committee will define what the non-negotiables are with meeting those new standards. We then will conduct a deep review of the revised ELA standards so that we can identify what major shifts exist. Later in the spring, early summer, we're going to complete a comprehensive needs assessment using all our data sources. We're going to have resource audits as well as input opportunities for our essential partners. But we are going to we'll close it up with identifying clear gaps that exist and what options are required to fill them and what those cost estimates could be. Continuing in the summer and fall, we will have a representative from the committee. They're going to lead our structure reviews. We're going to have our community engagement, and then we also will have targeted field testing so that we can understand and see what the real classroom evidence is. Late 2026, later this year, late part, this is when we're going to synthesize and look at the trade-offs. We're going to examine those, and we're going to look at any findings that we have so that we can develop a recommendation that is both standards aligned as well as aligned fiscally. Then in the spring of 2027, that is when we focus on professional learning and making sure that there is a readiness to launch our implementation of the new ELA standards. In addition, with the professional learning, we're going to also establish our monitoring before as well as during and after the transition, how we're going to know that we're meeting the needs of our teachers and any adjustments that we may have in order to ensure they have the full support that they need. But the key takeaway that I want to share is that this timeline, these activities reflect a deliberate, educator-driven process that's going to ensure any ELA decision that we bring to you as the board is evidence-based, it will be standards-aligned, and it will be implementation-ready. Thinking about our next steps at this point, because I shared that the ELA standards have been approved, our next step is the district will focus on that needs assessment. We're going to look at our internal capacity building and planning for the standards. This phase will allow us to ensure the readiness, clarify our priorities, instructional priorities, and prepare for that effective implementation. Any further recommendations, again, will be grounded in evidence, instructional need, and implementation readiness. So in closing, this work, this process reflects the district's commitment to thoughtful planning, instructional coherence, and responsible stewardship of our resources. So we as a team appreciate your attentiveness, and we'd like to open it up to any questions or comments you may have for us.
Thank you, Drs. Hill and King, for providing the board with this overview of this process, and also being very transparent to the public so they can understand how these changes will be taking place. So I'll open up to questions. I'll start with Vice Chair Hershey.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair Swanson. So you talked about the funding, and we just had a funding exercise in our budget committee meeting. Can you talk about where the funding comes from, what the funding covers? Because you mentioned professional development as well, on top of whatever needs to be purchased. And then I think my second question would be, all things being equal, how much, if we're ever switching curriculum, how much of an improvement do you need to see from studies that say it's worthwhile to actually make that switch from the academic side of it? I hope that makes sense.
So there is a textbook allotment that comes from DPI, and so therefore those are certain parameters in which we have to guide those decisions, and looking at what we're going to be able to negotiate to make sure that we're covering for all of our district needs. When we look at those curriculum standards or what drive our instruction, we have several resources from the state as also from ed reports that give us a synopsis of how those curriculum are in fact in alignment with the standards. And so those are ready resources in order for us to really and truly use those resources as we move through that process. But we just want to make sure that we're being very transparent to give all of our stakeholders a voice and from their perspective and a review of those materials. But we do have certain parameters guided by what is given to us from the Department of Public Instruction in order to guide those decisions.
And Mr. Hershey, I do want to add to that message that Dr. Hill shared, that I think the important question is, why do we switch? And that's very important. And all of that is going to be based on the type of changes in curriculum standards at the state, how effective the current curriculum is in meeting that, and ultimately, when we make a change, what does that mean for teachers to have to learn a new curriculum or a new process? And so those are all the things that go into it. I'll just have to be honest that budgeting is also a huge part of that, because we recognize that if we make a change, then that's usually going to come with a cost. And so it is about making sure that we properly vetted any new curriculum and how it aligns with the state standards, and then looking at the ultimate impact on what it's going to take to implement that curriculum. I think the biggest piece is, regardless of what change we make in terms of switching or staying, it is how we monitor how it's being implemented in schools. And so I appreciate that question, but we do want people to know that it is a process that we go through.
Dr. Ng?
Thank you. I was just kind of looking through that chart. So I assume that for the most part, it's an 8-year cycle for every different curriculum to be reviewed, correct?
Correct.
Except for the ELA, which was, I guess, truncated. And then I see that the full implementation and the state assessment happens on that same academic year. So, I mean, I'm assuming that all implementation should be done by the beginning of that academic year, correct?
For a new resource?
For example, for ELA, full implementation is 27-28 academic year. So I'm assuming that everything should be in place by that academic year to be ready for the assessment, correct?
Correct.
That is correct.
Okay. And in what part of the process do you engage with the community for feedback? And And is there a way to, I guess my analogy is, you don't throw away the baby with the bathwater. Is there a possibility of picking and choosing things that we can keep for, and which are still good, and then introducing new things that are needed because of the modification of the curriculum standards? Just, for the sake of costs, looking at, do we need to reintroduce a new way of doing things, and then incurring the cost of it? Can we do it in a more cost-effective way? Thank you.
And so, Dr. Ng, as you will see outlined in those phases, and we're looking at phase 3, where we have the decision-making and approval, we will have structures in which all stakeholder groups will be able to give their input regarding this. And those things in which we're in the process right now, looking at how our students are, in fact, performing, and what are those things that are, in fact, working. So therefore, that becomes part of the discussion of how our children are, in fact, doing with the current resources and how our teachers are feeling with their implementation. So it's a continuous process of looking at those items that we need to examine as we move this process forward.
If I may, Dr. Hill, I do want to point out in phase 1, that is where we are first seeking, during our needs assessment, that we are seeking input on what we currently have in place. And we will also have another input opportunity in phase 2 during the research and evaluation. So just wanted to add that little bit more about those expanded opportunities that we have for our essential partners. Yes.
So, Dr. Ng, excuse me, and I'll stop interjecting at some point, but I know this is critical to the selection process in terms of making sure that we have an effective way for teachers to give feedback, for parents to give feedback, and ultimately what we want to make sure that comes out of this process is that when we select the curriculum, that everybody agrees that we know it can be effective. And so I would imagine in the medical field, there may be some processes or equipment that you all may slightly differ upon, but then there are going to be some things that you all agree this is the wrong way to treat high blood pressure. And so what we want to make sure is that when we go through this process, that there may be one group that likes curriculum A versus curriculum B, but when we give a good, transparent way for them to share, that both groups can, whoever may have a difference of opinion, can say that while I prefer curriculum B, if we don't choose it, then we're okay with implementing A, but at least there's been a transparent way for us to share. But if we recognize that C is a very bad curriculum and we don't really listen to the input or the feedback from anyone, and then we have C and it ends up being a debacle, then that really falls back on us. So I, again, think it's the right question. Mr. Hurst, I do want to go back to the funding piece just very quickly. I know the finance department is going to pull up some numbers for us, but it really is in multiple places. So there is the state textbook funding that we get, but is also heavily supported by local funds as well. And then in some instances, there will be federal funding, such as Title I, that may provide additional supplemental material. But we'll get a breakdown of that for you.
Thank you. All right. Ms. Rice, we'll recognize you for your questions.
Good evening, everyone. I just had a very brief question. And I've heard what we've shared about our curriculum. Just a curious question around when you're engaging stakeholders or when you're making your decisions around the curriculum, is there any thought to the curriculums that we've seen work with some of our partners? Is there any thought to either incorporating that within our regular structured classes or even using those curriculums if they align with what the new DPI requirements might be?
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Rice, and please know, the forefront of everything is that the standards are what drive the instruction. And so therefore, those pieces will always be taken under consideration as we're looking at what has worked, what needs to be modified, and what we may want to look in a different direction for. But the bottom line is, standards are what drive our instruction.
Thank you.
We'll come around this side. We'll start with Ms. Edmonds.
Thank you. So my question is also related to funding, but a different question. So DPI understands that this has fiscal implications for districts. And DPI apparently just shared with the North Carolina Association of School Business Officers about the state's impending fiscal cliff. So have you all heard from DPI any kind of pause or concern that they understand that districts are going to be in trouble here shortly with finances? And are they taking that into consideration as they implement these new standards that require districts to make purchases, spend resources in order to comply with them?
Ms. Edmonds, we have our updated meeting at the end of this month of January, so I'm going to be paying very close attention to what it is, because we're all in that same category, and how we're trying to adapt to the fiscal cliff and then implement these revisions of standards. So therefore, it's a balance that we're going to have to make sure that we're considering, and we should receive those updates. I have a scheduled meeting at the end of this month. Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Gordon?
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hill and Dr. King. I can definitely appreciate that the very first slide, it says educator-driven approach. Just want to throw that plug in there. With that in mind, you made mention to a committee, and you said the committee will decide what our non-negotiables are. Can you tell me who exactly is on that committee?
We have, in our process, our manual, we've identified, of course, key leaders at the district level, leaders within the schools. We've even broke down with a process to work with our area superintendents so they can work with principals to identify representation within their school building. There will be one large district team, but then, of course, committees of that team as well. But we're very diligent with being very inclusive in that work.
Follow-up? How common is it for like instructional coaches and just classroom teachers? How common is it for them to be a part of the committee?
In enhancing our process, that is an area that we were more intentional about, where connecting where there would be representation from all schools where they have someone who has a voice in that committee. So we were very intentional about that process of who would give us from the very beginning. Well, we could have a kickoff. Here are what the new standards are. Here's the process that we would use, that they would be informed and be able to know when they get to have voice, choice, what's coming next, what to expect.
Okay, thank you.
You're so welcome.
We'll go Mr. Hagerty and then Dr. Job.
All right, thank you, Chair Swanson. Hello, hello. So I have a question, and then I do want to share what I will call a cautionary tale in terms of some feedback. I'm curious about the development of the curriculum. I remember a presentation from Dr. Wilson Norman and Mr. Cook before, Dr. Hill, you had come to this position, talking about the ELA curriculum, EL education being homegrown, for teachers and by teachers, and the importance of getting feedback from those teachers to develop a product, to develop a curriculum aligned with the state standards, but that was kind of based on that input here in Wake County. from where you are going forward today, do you see yourselves following a similar path, or is it something that you think you would take a different approach?
Mr. Hager, that's a very good question. And so what we're in the process right now, looking at how our students are in fact progressing and how our teachers are feeling with actually implementing. So all of that is really and truly going to have to be enfolded into this process to see what exactly, I guess, is on the menu for moving forward. But what we have to stress is our students are going to be assessed on the standards. And so therefore, how can we ensure that that is what is our driving force to make sure that our pacing guides, our assessment, and the core instructional materials and supplemental materials are in fact addressing what the standard is calling for our students to show mastery of. You want to add anything?
That was good.
Anything, Dr. King? Okay.
Thank you.
All right, and I appreciate that. I really do. I think the challenge is that there are a lot of different ways to approach the standards, and then what's going to be, the most effective for our teachers to deliver that content and for our students to learn the content. And so then, just briefly, Mr. Chair, I want to share a cautionary tale because it predates the rest of the board members. But when it comes to public input and engagement, sometimes the input that we receive is not always, I'll say, representative. And those that are tasked with providing an opinion on, say, a particular curriculum product or provider may be doing so with just a limited view of what they get in a very small information session compared to the feedback they might be getting from professional educators or longtime experts. And in particular, many in the room are familiar with, even if you weren't necessarily in your specific roles today, in 2017, 2018, we adopted a new math curriculum. And in the process of adopting that curriculum, there was a public engagement process. And in that process, staff identified 2 different products for teaching higher level mathematics. There was one product which was provided for by a more established, and I would argue reputable company, but it was very dry, very academic, as academic stuff might tend to be. And then there was a newer product that was regarded as more exciting. And the staff recommendation originally was for the more traditional product. But after rounds of public engagement, taking the product out to the public, and this is a story we've seen repeated, whether it was in The Music Man or The Simpsons buying into a monorail, the showmanship of the flashy new product won out. And it was right after that decision that was made that I came to the board, and we had 2 years of difficulty and negative feedback from parents, from staff, from teachers surrounding that product. And our professional staff had to devote a tremendous amount of time to additional professional development, working with staff to try to find accommodations for students that couldn't necessarily follow the curriculum as it was provided, and the curriculum provider couldn't support all of the needs of the students we have here in Wake County, some who may not learn from videos, for example, or other ways that the instruction was being delivered. And so the input is very, very important, but I just would caution everyone, based on this experience, that, hearing, do you like me, do you not like me, check A, check B, you need a more thorough and evaluative process. And it can't just be which product comes out as the most popular, which one addresses a trend. I think we really need to rely on our experts. And it can be experts here, it can be advice from other states and other districts, from other systems maybe that have used different curriculum tools and what their experience has been. But I just don't wish on anyone, professional staff, yourselves, this board, our families, and our public, a process similar to what we went through before. Thank you.
So, Mr. Haggard, I do want to add to that statement that that is the key piece, that it is about making sure that we have some basic safeguards that are in place that say that a curriculum has to meet certain standards. Now, normally DPI will give you a lot of feedback on that. There are some other organizations that can do the same thing, but it is about making sure that whatever we select, it focuses on the core, but then there's also some portion that talks about the supplemental for when the student does not respond to the core. But that is traditionally an issue that districts have had to face across the state. That is it something that people like, and there has not been an opportunity or a chance to do vetting by the professionals now. And teachers are certainly a part of that because they are on the ground, but you also have curriculum specialists and people that have a lot of specifically designed, obtained abilities in that area. And so that's what we want to make sure that we safeguard. And so Wake experienced it X number of years ago. We're going to count on that experience from those that we hear. But I've seen it in other places as well. And so that, I think, is the big part that we want to prevent. So we appreciate that.
Dr. Joe?
Thank you for being here. Looking at the phase, the needs assessment, we have so much data coming in all the time from students and assessments. And how could you expand a bit upon which data you're going to be looking at and how some of the processes you're going to use to narrow down how you're going to identify the gaps that need to be filled if we do need a new curriculum?
So, yes, with the needs assessment, we spent really all of last school year with examining our system, our manual, and one of the pieces that we wanted to make sure we put in place were templates and rubrics that were vetted, that were research-based to help us identify what we currently have, where the gaps with the standards exist, then what do we do about meeting those gaps that were aligned with research. So we were very purposeful in identifying those pieces.
Vice Chair Hershey?
Just a few follow-ups, kind of piggybacking on a couple of my colleagues. You mentioned non-negotiables. Aside from the curriculum needing to cover the standards, what are examples of non-negotiables?
When we look at non-negotiables, we have instructional frameworks that are research-based with those instructional strategies. And so therefore, that's a non-negotiable. That for ELA, there is a particular framework in which we want our students and their teachers to engage in, from whole group instruction, direct instruction, to small group instruction, to identify prescriptive learning gaps and to address those needs. So that is an example of a non-negotiable. And the evidence that we have seen when that core curriculum is in fact followed and implemented with fidelity, and when those products for learning plans, non-negotiables, assessment, we are seeing the progress for our students. And therefore, there are going to be some non-negotiables in dealing with how ELA, English Language Arts, is in fact delivered within that particular balanced literacy framework.
That's extremely helpful. Thank you for that. To kind of piggyback on Ms. Edmonds' question, which I think was an excellent question, and maybe this is also for Dr. Taylor, do we have the opportunity to give feedback? I mean, I don't know how significant a change could be in the standards. And do we have an opportunity to provide feedback if it's going to be a minimal change that would otherwise be incredibly costly to school districts to say, I guess I don't know how DPI makes their decision. And then if we have, because you guys are on the ground and doing the work, and how you're able to provide feedback to DPI, to Ms. Edmonds' point, which is incredibly valid and super important right now, is a small change could cost us a lot of money. And I think it also gets to Dr. Ng's point, which is, are there opportunities to just add a little bit versus a whole new curriculum? But I'm just wondering what feedback we're able to provide, because I know you said you have the meeting later, but I want us to be giving them feedback as well, which I think was kind of the genesis of Ms.
Yes.
Edmonds' question.
Yeah, so we do have multiple opportunities to give feedback to DPI. I know they do that many times on a regional basis. Dr. King, you may be able to talk about that from your perspective when you were at DPI. And so there are opportunities that we do get to give feedback. The other thing that I'll add is that while they may make standards changes, a district doesn't necessarily have to switch. You could keep using the same curriculum and keep purchasing the consumables that you need, but ultimately what you come to is, if there have been substantial changes in the standards, does this curriculum still meet that? And now, does that require that we go through a change? And many years in the past, a lot of this was based on textbooks. And so textbooks had the standards, and that's where you saw districts receive a tremendous amount of money for textbooks to purchase those that were aligned with the standards. And so in that regard, again, they can make changes, but you don't necessarily have to change your curriculum. But if you stay with it, then you may end up having a curriculum that doesn't meet the majority of the standards that the state provides. The other piece, and we got about $4.8 million from the state for textbook and digital purposes, and they're still going to pull up and let me know what the total amount is. They'll let me know what the local piece was. And so, the other piece is also selecting the curriculum. To go back to, I think, Dr. Job's question, part of it, that it is about looking at the data from a curriculum provider and saying, well, what does your data show in terms of students being able to meet these standards where it's being used, also examining where our students are not meeting standards and if it aligns up with that, and making sure that curriculum also aligns with the state standards. And the last piece is that, and I think we all know that whenever something new comes along, every curriculum provider will say that they meet the state standards simply by, I think it was research-based was the big thing 20 years ago. Everybody put that on there, whether it met it or not. And so I think those things are all part of the non-negotiable that we look at. How much funding do we get from the state, and how much of a large or small pivot we can make or have to make. But I'll let you, Dr. King, add your experience from DPI as well.
Yes, the draft that the state board chose was a draft 4 of the ELA standards. There were multiple opportunities. They have district committees, and those district committees, they put out surveys. We received the surveys for our staff as well as our community to participate in. We put those on our website so they can have input, and then that information is used by DPI to make adjustments to what each revision, if you will, each draft of those standards that are being developed are. Even as late as this past September, before the timeline, the revision timeline was completely updated, there was an opportunity for, across the state, the chief academic officers to get into small groups to have another look at where the ELA standards were and any last feedback. I don't know if it was the last, but additional feedback. But DPI really went above and beyond. I've been away now almost 2 years, and the level of detail and active engagement of trying to get over and over and over again input on the standards that they were going to ask for state approval on was really heavily involved.
And we are very appreciative to DPI for not having ELA and math revisions in the same year. And so therefore, that really and truly is taxing on the district. And so we really and truly appreciate them listening to us to have those not in the same cycle.
So I just have a couple of comments and questions, kind of follow up on some of the discussion that's been held or that we've had thus far. And just following up on what Mr. Hegarty had shared, learning from the past, can we kind of talk about how our new regional model will ensure that we don't, necessarily fall down that pathway of presenting, materials that may, attract some families to give them the green light and vice versa? Can you talk about how that model is helping with this process?
The transparency, Chair Swanson, with our regional model, it really and truly gives us an opportunity to see what is working on the front lines. Boots to the ground so we can make sure that we're really and truly seeing what is being implemented, coaching those teachers on their practices, and then providing support in a very timely, frequency, as needed manner as we're going through that. So therefore, you have the support that's right there in order to give them what support they need in a very timely manner,
And then, I know when I've been out of the classroom a couple of years now, and, professional learning teams, PLCs was an opportunity. Is that going to be another driving force where I know you can't include all, I don't know how many English ELA teachers we have, but how will that information be synthesized down to those PLTs to get back into the school building so that information can flow on both ends?
And that will be a component of that implementation plan. So therefore, as a large district, we have to look at those resources and those different avenues of how we're going to give that much-needed support. So that becomes in partnership with our Office of Professional Learning so that we can look at and what the vendor, in fact, can provide for us, but we have some non-negotiables of what we want to ask in order to meet those needs. Coupled with learning walks, coupled with that on-the-ground training, PLC implementation, coaching, all of that will encompass the implementation support for our teachers.
Right. And I should have clarified, the PLC is a professional learning teams that
yes, I'm sorry.
takes place. Sorry, I'm used to spitting those acronyms out as well. So, but no, this has been very helpful. And thank you for answering those questions. Are there any other questions or comments as it relates to our procurement process? All right. Hearing none, thank you all, and we look forward to the updates as this moves forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We will now turn to Mr. Strickland and Ms. Lawrence to discuss the child nutrition services as it relates to our Angel Fund. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for allowing us the opportunity to come and share this information with you all today. I'll point out, not in the slide deck, but this discussion today about the CNS charge policy update and where we go with that is part of our strategic alignment with Priority 3, operational effectiveness, and most of the stuff in operations falls under AIM 20, which is efficient, sustainable, which is a key word today with the conversation that we're going to have in of operational systems. So we had Ms. Lawrence here, and Ms. Moore didn't choose to sit up here with us. That's okay. She's our business manager for CNS and the numbers person. And Ms. Lawrence is going to talk through conversations that we've been having for some time regarding our charge policy for meals. We talked about this some time ago in the last few years, and at that time, although we have a policy in place, it was the sentiment we felt like from the board that we needed to be as gracious as we could with the implementation of that policy in terms of feeding students. And so we have done that, but at the same time, we're having to face the financial realities of where we are with CNS and where we could potentially end up being. So with that being said, we wanted to bring this update to you all, reinforce that we do have some challenges, both perceived and real, in terms of unpaid meal charges, and that we really need to go back to following the policy with rigor and with fidelity and making sure that we can get to the end of the year without a large amount of unpaid meal balances. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Lawrence.
Good afternoon, Board and Dr. Taylor. Thanks for having us here today. I want to talk about the CNS charge policy. There were a couple of handouts that I provided for you all that I'll kind of refer to throughout the presentation. A copy of the current board policy 6220, which is the outline of our actual process. A negative balance Q&A, which is kind of answering some questions that we frequently get asked about how we communicate to parents and the community. And then the Angel Fund balance update, because we have the Angel Fund that kind of helps cover some of the negative charge balances, and so you can see the amount of money that we're bringing in on a monthly basis and up to year-to-date numbers. So the
Slide 4, please.
Slide 4, I'm sorry. Should I?
Yes.
I'm sorry. So, all right. So a summary of what the actual board policy says is that students that don't have money in their accounts, they are allowed to charge negative balances for breakfast and lunch up to 3 consecutive days. They don't have to be in the same period, but just 3 days total to that dollar amount. Students that get to that amount, after that point, they receive an alternative meal. It also states that the superintendent shall not use school nutrition funds to offset the cost of these negative charge balances. That is not necessarily a board rule, that is a USDA federal guideline, and so we are not allowed to clear negative debt with the school nutrition funds. And then the USDA basically decides that. And so the board policy, like I said, is attached inside of Assembly for you all to review. So currently, according to the policy, we provide an alternative meal, which is an unlimited fruits and vegetables and a water for students. That is actually what is listed in the process. The cost of that is about $1.34. That doesn't include the things to like put it on the plate, the fork, the napkin, those kind of things. That's just the food item. And so I wanted to share that with you so you can see what it costs. In the past, the district does support us because we do have students that fall into that negative realm. About $46,000 a year they cover in negative charge balances. The concern that we have moving forward is that that amount is growing, and because school nutrition can't cover that debt, the money to cover that gap between what the district already budgets to cover and support school nutrition in this process. So to date, we have a negative balance total for the district of $152,000, $152,170.53. That amount grows daily. It also changes daily because we do have parents that pay off their negative balances, but it goes up and down, back and forth. Currently, in order to address that, we have an Angel Fund. It is a district-wide Angel Fund, and the way it works is that parents, community members, organizations donate to a master pot, and then we take that money and we spread it amongst all schools evenly to help keep the to keep the negative balances down. What's happening right now is that amount is superseding what we can actually cover in the amount of how many students are actually using the negative, growing their negative account balances. To date, if we keep at the same rate, I estimate that we'll be at over $250,000 in the negative by the end of the school year, by that June 30th closing date. And so that is the concern that we want to try to prevent us from being at that level of a negative debt.
Ms. Lawrence, if I can
Yes.
clarify really quick. That's if we do not follow the policy.
Correct.
Okay.
So right now, we are not technically following the actual board policy. What's happening is students come in, they get up to the 3 days, and then after that 3-day mark, they continue to build up a negative balance, and then we use the Angel Fund to cover that gap. we don't actually cover those first 3 days. We still look at the parent to cover that. But what's happening, you have some people who are not covering that plus the additional amount because the Angel Fund can only cover a fraction of it. And so one of the handouts that you all have is how much money we collect in the Angel Fund per month. And so you can see the difference. This particular school year, we haven't collected the same amount as we did last year. We do have 2 larger donors that typically give us funds, but then we have some sporadic donations from community members, churches, parents, PTAs, those kinds of things. So one of the things that we want to review is just making sure that the community is aware of why we're making this change, why we're trying to implement the actual current board policy. We're not creating anything new. We're not changing any rules. We're just going back to what the board had already previously agreed upon. The goal is to allow time for parents to be communicated with, to understand the process, if they need to fill out a free and reduced lunch application, maybe because they haven't, to answer questions so that we can move forward and enforce the actual policy that is in place. Our goal is to enforce this in about a month. February 17th is the suggested date, and that goes because it gives us a month as a district to communicate to parents, but also it gives time for me to communicate with principals, teachers, my staff, to make sure that the process is implemented in a smooth way. So does anyone have any questions? I think that's the majority.
Great, well, thank you, Ms. Lawrence, for sharing this, and I know this was presented to the vice chair and I, and we thought it was important to share it with the entire board to give some dialogue and feedback about how, and, you know, the steps to move forward with this, because again, I think the outstanding projected balance is alarming, and also knowing that we have to ensure that all kids can eat, so teaching and learning can take place. So I'll just start around the table to see if there's any comments or questions. Ms. Caulfield.
Thank you. I just wanted to go, if we could speak on slide 4. I know that we had brought this up, and I believe it was last year, that we were talking about, am I on the right slide? The 3, when they exceed the 3 days, it says that we are providing vegetables, fruit, and milk.
Vegetables, fruit, and water.
And water. So we did not go, I thought we were, when we discussed this last time, I thought we were providing, finding a way to provide a protein.
No, so, go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
I just don't see how kids can survive on vegetables and water when they don't have, I'd rather you skip the vegetables and give the protein.
I believe what we did is that we had directed the staff not to follow the current policy in order to avoid what some were calling like the meal of shame, right? And so there's a policy on the books, and if I interpret staff's request, they're asking permission to go back and enforce the policy as an alternative to the direction that we gave them. But because what we directed them to do is creating a large
Correct.
deficit.
That is
Great.
absolutely correct.
Okay, so then slide 4 is actually,
Yes, and that is an
so
error.
that's where the 153 came from.
Correct. And
Okay.
so even the estimated amount that the board currently, or the district currently budgets for to support us, it was built off knowing that they would have to provide the unlimited fruits and vegetables and the water. And so that was kind of like a roundabout amount that they kind of do every year. So like this past year, they cleared that because that's in the budget.
So we're at 152 right now, and we could be at, you said, 250 by the end of the year.
That's the estimate. I'm thinking at a minimum.
And how much have we received so far this year for angel funds?
So that's in the in Assembly. It's a handout.
It is, general donations, 87,000.
Okay.
$87,451.30.
That's correct.
Okay. So this presentation, we're asking for us to go back to policy to the vegetables and the water.
Correct. It's not necessarily focusing on the alternative meal definition. It's really just to go back to the policy to make sure that we're enforcing what was already on the books.
So to
Okay, so-
clarify on
Yes.
slide 5, it says 1 fruit, 2 vegetables, and a milk.
So it's unlimited fruits and vegetables, but in order to give you a cost estimate, I just made that estimate because most kids are going to pick up like a full cup of vegetables and a fruit, but it is unlimited. So the cost could change. So if they were to keep going back, it would increase. But most kids typically aren't going to go back that many times, but that is definitely an option if they need to.
So to kind of follow up on Chair Swanson, I know you said water, but on the slide it does say milk.
Yes, that
So-
was an error.
Okay, so it should be water.
The policy
Okay.
currently says water.
Okay.
Vice Chair Hershey.
So what would be the cost if we had them, allowed them to have the main meal versus the sides?
So the meals are planned daily, and there's not necessarily a set cost every day. So an example would be if I serve a white meat chicken breast sandwich on one day, that's a more expensive meal than me serving a hot dog. So it would vary, so I wouldn't be able to give you an exact, but I could tell you, for instance, if I did a turkey sandwich, it would be $3.14. If they did a pizza meal, it would be $3.07, and if we did a cheese sandwich, it would be $2.80.
I thought we had, at some point, a peanut butter sandwich, peanut butter and jelly sandwich, or something that was part of the alternative meal.
Not that I know of. Well, now, we do have Crustables on our menu, but
Right.
Crustables aren't as affordable as traditional peanut butter and jelly. And then also be mindful that we do serve peanut butter in our schools, but when you start getting into like your elementary kids, there are some allergy concerns also with that. So we do have processes in place, but peanut butter is not necessarily the first choice.
Right, so I have I cannot just do 1 fruit and 2 vegetables and water. I think we are going to get rightfully skewered by the public on that. How are we not able to, I mean, I know it's complicated, but a loaf of bread and a jar of something at a store could make a whole lot of food for not much money.
Grilled cheese.
Right. I mean, you can make a lot for $1 per meal. So where's our creativity to be able to provide more than a fruit and 2 vegetables and water? And I'm not putting the blame on you or anybody else. And I know it would require work on our end, more work for our staff. But, you know, it was almost one thing when it was milk and not water, because there's some substance to milk. I don't know how we explain this to, and I do want to recognize too that clearly there are some people taking advantage of the fact that we are paying and not charging. And that's
Correct.
problematic. And I encourage those people to please do your part. And that's why we're even having the conversation here, because there are people that could be paying and that are not. And so we have to call that out. And that's clear by the evidence of the cost this year versus past years.
I do want to be mindful that we don't need to do this as a public shaming, because we
It's not a-
also,
well-
I just want to make sure that we're being delicate, because the fact that.
I am being
there's-
delicate.
Mr. Vice Chair, let
Well,
me.
I was not done, but go ahead.
I will, because I do have the gavel, sir. So
Okay, man.
So let's just, I get that this is a very delicate, and I get it. But what I wanted to caution is saying that we cannot use the opportunity to potentially shame folks for not covering meals, because again, we don't understand folks' situation, but we also understand that the CNS is a additional business as well. And so just make sure that we're being very delicate of the two was the only thing that I was chiming in about.
I am not shaming anyone who has legitimate problems. I'm talking about people who are knowingly manipulating the system. And I think the facts bear that out, and staff has talked about that. But getting back to the main point is, how do we provide them something? Because if they go with a fruit and a vegetable and water, what are they doing? I mean, some of them are getting fed at 10 a.m. or 11 a.m., and they have 3 more hours. What's the impact of on our grades and our school systems and on our teachers that have to deal with that?
So what I would say is that if a student is not properly nourished, then we know that's going to have an impact on learning. And you know, I'd be the first one to tell you that. I do want to remind everyone that a student that does not pay, they actually get the first 3 meals, which is the full meal. So it's not saying that if you don't have funding day one, you don't get anything. And so I do know that the intent of the board, it's been almost 2 years, was to say that we don't want to put kids in a position to where they're not able to get a full meal as they're going through this. And we also knew and understood that we had an angel fund that was now, I think, had gotten a little more traction, and we were getting more funding. And so we were hoping that was a way to sort of balance that off. But when we look at the trends and the numbers, we know that before, when we had 3 regular meals and then the alternate meal, our district cost was about $40,000 for unpaid balances. But with that change, it's kind of put us in a position to where whether someone is taking advantage or not taking advantage, it's kind of put us in a fiscal position to where by not doing anything and not enforcing the policy, that number is going to continue to grow. And that's what we wanted to do, is to make sure we had good, clear understanding from the board as to what the implications are. So that's what I wanted to share.
I also wanted to remind everyone that when a family is experiencing a hard time, no matter what day of the school year, it could be the last day, the first day, the middle, after Christmas, they are welcome to complete a free and reduced lunch application, and they can get benefits at any point. And so we don't decide those guidelines, USDA does, but those opportunities for families who are struggling are always there throughout the school year. So I just want to make sure everybody remembers that part as well.
Thank you. Ms. Rice, and then we'll go to Mr. Haggerty and then Dr. Joe.
Thank you. I appreciate the diligence that CNS is always trying to bring to the table around this situation. I have just about 2 or 3 questions. One, I was curious about what have we done outside of just angel funds from our last conversation on last year around the same issue, that we around the table believe that students should be fed regardless. So I was curious to what did the department or whomever may be responsible for those particular areas, or we as a board, what do we do besides just Angel Fund, or talked about it one time last year that got all this amazing attention for the need, but what do we do to connect with deeper partners to just constantly raise funds for this particular situation? That's question 1.
So we have continued community partners with the people that we have relationships with, and we do have regular meetings trying to talk about how we're going to raise funds. But part of the issue is that between like staff running their schools and things like that, we don't have anybody that's completely dedicated to raise funds for school nutrition. And so that has been a challenge for our department, is to have somebody who has the time to focus on that work.
I understand that. That can be that's a fair answer. Did we build any new partners in the process? I heard you speak about our current partners. Did we build any new partners, or get our new partners to probably reach out? I mean, our current partners to reach out to the old partners?
So I know that one of our partners, for Children's Partners, she does a good job in trying to build other relationships, and that's sometimes how we end up getting more money from that organization, because we have meetings with her on a regular to help us grow. And then we also have community members that make smaller donations. The thing is that they aren't large enough to cover where the gap is growing.
Okay, thank you. Chair Swanson, my other question is, are we addressing hunger as more of a compliance issue or is a core barrier to student success? I'm just curious, for me, hunger is not necessarily a behavior problem. It's more of a learning barrier. And I've heard my colleagues kind of talk about that a little bit. So I'm able to, being at home, I'm able to sit here and write my thoughts out a little bit and stay direct. But we had the same conversation last year, and I'm just curious that we've heard Vice Chair speak about the importance. What are the effects if students don't eat? We heard our superintendent respond to that there are effects. So I'm just curious at what point, as we as a board make this a non-negotiable factor, and it's not something that comes back to our table every year, that we're committed to making sure children eat, because we know the research and we know the historic challenges behind when children are not able to eat. And the last thing I'll say, Chair Swanson, is in reference to my former colleague, Monica Johnson-Hostler, to Ms. Tiffany's response about, I keep hearing us say, as a whole, fill out the free and reduced lunch form. We know that there are dignity challenges around that. And I asked last year, and I'll ask again this year, what will we do to focus more on, instead of asking about free and reduced lunch, but how are we going to continue to talk about nutrition as a whole and make it appealing, and then kind of create a dynamic around where everybody fills out the form, regardless of their economic background, just so that we can have the data as a whole. And so I just want to remind people, in the spirit of Ms. Monica Johnson-Hostler, as she said, my mama didn't fill out that form, even though we may have needed it. And so I don't want us to lose sight of that. And that's all that I have, Chair Swanson. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, well, I shouldn't.
Oh,
okay. Well, I know one of the things, because as we prepare for next school year and some of the changes that are going to be implemented based off the big, beautiful bill, some of the things I do plan to do this spring is to go out and speak at some of the community events, so that I am basically in front of an audience to explain why they need to fill out the application, the importance of it, because one of our concerns is that we might lose participation next year if some of these things get implemented. And so that is some of the things that we are doing. And then, of course, our applications are available online. Of course, paper copies. We send paper copies out to schools. And so we do plan to do some more community engagement around free and reduced and why it's important for people to fill out the forms.
And Mr. Chair, I'll add that when I go out to schools, I see some very innovative work that people are doing to make school lunch more inclusive. We've seen second chance programs that take place. So I think schools are really doing the work of helping everybody to understand why school nutrition can help solve a lot of problems. Now, the bad side to that is that when they recognize that and more people participate, which is what we want, it also puts us in a position where those that participate may choose not to pay. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, if you will. But I think what I've seen is schools are doing a really good job in helping people to understand the benefits of being a part of the school nutrition program. So I did want to share that.
Thank you. Ms. Rice, I see your hand is. Did you have a follow-up?
I do. I apologize. I just want to ask to make sure that are we unintentionally disciplining poverty instead of addressing a need? And so I'm sorry, I'm passionate about this particular challenge. I understand we do have budget concerns, but I just know where we are right now in Wake County amongst the most vulnerable students. And if I can be transparent and honest, if we were to look at the data possibly within those students, you would find that a great deal of my students in District 4 may be greatly impacted with being able to only eat a fruit or a water to sustain them. considering they may not get anything when they get home. In some cases, not all.
Thank you. We'll go Mr. Haggerty, Dr. Jobe, Ms. Gordon. I'll get to follow-ups, and then Ms. Edmonds, and then I'll do follow-ups.
All right, thank you, Chair Swanson. First, I do want to thank you all for the work that you've done. I know that you came into a very challenging situation, and you all have worked hard to try to address these problems, and I appreciate you bringing the problems to us now, rather than waiting till the end of the year when there is a large deficit, and then trying to, figure out what we do in a crisis situation. I also want to thank the 4Children Partnership, the BAPS Charities, and those that have made significant donations to the Angel Fund. In working with these groups, a lot of them seem committed to continued support. I know that Chair Swanson, Ms. Edmonds, and I have been to one of their fundraisers, or actually two fundraisers, both the Fun Run and the Christmas event. And I think that together we can identify other potential partners that might want to fund this work. I also want to acknowledge the A.J. Fletcher Foundation, who I believe also made a generous donation to this work as well. But while that philanthropy is important, as we've seen, we still have a deficit. And, we just came out of a budget and finance meeting where we identified a number of essential programs that are not required by the state, but that require local funds or other funding that's not significant. And we know that for every service and program we want to provide, we do have to find funding for it. And so I do want to, and with all due respect, I want to readdress a question Mr. Hershey had, and then maybe provide an answer for him, which was Mr. Hershey had asked if we had any sort of estimate on what it might cost to continue to follow our current practice of providing a full meal rather than the alternative meal. And my suggestion, while acknowledging that day to day the individual meal price varies, is it looks like we have a year of data. Yeah, we have a year of data that shows what that deficit is, and it looks like it's about $250,000. So it would seem that if we wanted to continue our direction, which is different than the policy, we'd need to come up with $150,000 to $250,000 from, our operating funds in order to cover that deficit. Now, I say operating funds, if we could find that in other private philanthropy, that could pay for it. If we could find that and reduce costs somewhere, we could do that. But it seems to me, and if I'm wrong, let me know, but it seems to me that that's really the target that we're looking for. And so I think we've heard from the majority of the board that providing these kids a meal more substantial than the meal described in the policy is the desire of the board. And I say that in full recognition of the challenge in being able to pay for it. So then I think the challenge falls back on us to then figure out how we can pay for it. And then ultimately, if we can pay for it and it's sustainable, we need to change that policy to bring it into alignment with what we've stated we should do versus having a policy that's in conflict with what we say is the right thing to do. So our options, and I appreciate folks have thrown out some ideas and suggested some stuff I hadn't thought of, but it seems to me our options are to follow the policy, which I think you're hearing some feedback that that's not where a lot of board members would like to go. We can fund the deficit somehow, finding a corresponding cut from some other program in the operating budget, and then reallocating those funds to this very important student need. This won't be popular, but we could increase lunch prices for those who can pay, knowing that the current lunch prices do not cover the cost of the meals. In doing so, we may have more students that need the free lunch, but if we have more students of affluence that can cover that cost, that's a potential option, just as finding a way to sell more meals or more of those additional items that, we sell to generate profits. If there was a way to do that, we could put more money into the program. There's some other ideas, something that Mr. Hershey had championed with the SHARE program. I know that in my district, this is the one from Toward Zero Waste.
Yes.
With the food reclamation. My district in District 7 wasn't one that had participated in the program, but we had speakers come out there. Many of the PTAs, many of the principals were very excited, and so they have added the program. And so the fact that you could have fresh food that's available to students throughout the day may be something that can help supplement and make sure that those kids, especially those ones that are eating at like 9:45 or 10 in the morning, can get something later in the afternoon. Is there some radical change that we need to address? I've asked this before. If our current CNS system with its federal guidelines is restrictive to the point that we just can't cover costs, do we need to look at other alternative systems that maybe other districts around the state are pursuing with private prep kitchens or, ways to bring the private sector in? We frequently have people come up and offer, to Ms. Rice's point about partnerships, people that want to help, but they're often scared off by the red tape and what those FDA regulations are. The state government has a program for farm-to-table meals that no one can participate in because it doesn't meet the FDA regs, right? And I think our own state lawmakers see this frustration, and maybe they could help us in this regard. So if we want to do what we're currently doing, which is in violation of the policy, I think all of us are incumbent on finding a way to pay for it. That's my main point, and I just do want to add about the free and reduced lunch form, again, to another point that was raised. I've carried it around for months, and I just finally recycled it, so I don't have my prop. But if you look at that form, y'all, it really is like a tax form, and not one of the easies either. It's intimidating. I think it can scare people off. And if there was a way we could collect that information in a way that was more family-friendly, more approachable, even just larger type, right, and some spacing, it might be a longer form, but it might be more inviting to people. And, we can market it in a way that's more of an opportunity to include people than it is to exclude people. I think those would all be good ideas. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Dr. Jobe?
Thank you very much for coming, and I absolutely understand the issue here. I have a couple of clarifying questions, though. When you say that you communicate to parents when they've reached the 3-day mark, what does that communication look like?
So on, I think it is 2 to 3 days out of the week, we send an email, we do a call out. Managers also send a list to school administrators with a list of students who may be in a negative so that they can maybe communicate to those parents, and sometimes they may not respond to our managers. Some of our managers also use the app Talking Points because sometimes parents respond to texts quicker. And then we also have some staff members in central office that will call parents to kind of just reach out to kind of lighten the load of the managers in the schools to have like a phone conversation.
All right, and when you do email them or that kind of thing, do you attach the free and reduced lunch form to it?
Judy, did they get the? Yes, they do.
Okay, all right, because I'm wondering if what Mr. Hegarty was talking about could help with some of those barriers. Like if we had the social workers, reach out more and offer, like if the form was pre-filled out with, a lot of the information, or, if there was some way to make it more accessible and easy.
So the goal of communicating to the principal is actually for part of what you said, is actually for them to reach out to the social worker in some cases to maybe figure out maybe why the parent isn't submitting the application, because maybe they're having some challenges that as a manager we may not know about.
Right.
As far as pre-fill, it is very income tax, like, it is very specific to the family, because it's really verification of income. So it's address, how many kids live in your family, and, you know, your earnings. And then there's a spot where we don't verify everybody, but they have to submit it like IRS documents, because we verify a random sample.
Okay.
And so we have to be able to, like, pull from that part of it, too. So that's kind of why it's not, you know, we can't really pre-fill it, if that makes sense. The easiest thing we do now is, we do have people that answer phones, like, all the time, answer questions. We train our managers on how to answer questions. It's online. They can do it from their cell phone, because most people nowadays have a cell phone. So I think being digital is probably the best way that we respond, to make it as easy for parents as possible to respond.
I wonder how aware people are of what the income requirement is for free and reduced lunch too, because there might be a good population out there that is like, I'm not even going to bother with this because there's no way we qualify, when really they could.
So I cannot tell them what they need to put on their application, but it is public information that they can Google and research to see, if that makes sense. On the letter that we send out, typically they list the reduced rates, because it's kind of pre-sent to us from the state level, and then parents fill out according to their actual income.
And I guess my other question is more towards the beefing up the Angel Fund, because I can see there's less in there, you know, even though we're only halfway through the year, there's less than there was last year. But because we had, like, in my district, almost every school did a food drive or a food bank or something like that. If this was, if we made the schools, if we gave the schools almost permission to be more public about this issue, then maybe they would be raising money for this more than a food bank. And, you know, if they were helping their own community, that might be a way to go as well.
Correct, and there are some principals and PTAs who actually do that. Like, there are even departments within Wake County that, for Christmas, instead of doing gifts, they gave donations to the Angel Fund. So some of them are very active in that way. So it definitely would be a welcome thing.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Ms. Gordon?
Thank you. Before I ask my question, I did want to say that, and, you know, we keep bringing this up, but how you all have done a phenomenal job with communicating on social media. Like, I'm seeing the posts on my social media, like, I try to share it, like it. I think it's going to take the effort of the board as a whole to continue to elevate the information around CNS, and, you know, what you all are trying to communicate around nutrition, around, you know, menus for the week. But I also wanted to say, and I think this question has been asked in a variety of different ways, but what non-traditional resources or remedies have we explored? I know Mr. Haggerty has suggested several of them, but when I say, like, non-traditional, I'm thinking of, like, have we specifically looked at communities that are being most affected by this, and have we explored community organizations that are in that community that are willing to lend help?
I'm not specific to certain communities, but I also want to make sure that we all understand that, like, if you were to look at that balance, and I actually broke down the numbers before this meeting, 85% of that balance are from our paid kids. And so I want to make sure we understand that too. I think our needy kids are actually, their needs are being met, right? And so you have that other gap. And so even if we go out to the community, I feel like I would want to make sure that we're going to them for the right reasons, if that makes sense. And I'm not saying we can't help everybody, but I do think we need to be aware of who is actually really using those dollars or whatever. But we definitely can look at other opportunities to get help and support for sure. And those are great suggestions.
So, point of clarity. So you're saying that this is primarily coming from families that traditionally pay?
That traditionally pay and do not have a free and reduced lunch application that qualifies them for free or reduced.
Okay. And then one more question about
Sure.
the form. I can say as a parent, the form is just embarrassing. It's like Mr. Haggerty said, and I don't even know if that is, really up to us, but it is. As a mom, it's embarrassing to fill out and have to turn in. I know we have discussed it becoming digitally, so it can be filled out, in the comfort of your own home with, so you have some of that, what's the word I'm looking for? Privacy, thank you. What has been done to kind of move the form digitally, and is that even in our?
Yes. So we currently do most of our forms digitally.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and that's actually better for the parent and the family.
Okay.
Because the turnaround time is so much quicker. So when we were processing applications by hand, literally we're looking at every sheet of paper, checking lines. Digital, we literally pull up, we have a system that populates it and all the names. We go in, we click, we look at it real quick. It kind of knows what our numbers are pre-installed, and we can say approve, like literally seconds. It really changes the game on how fast we can turn around an application, and we do use those resources.
So the issue is that people are just not filling them out digitally?
Well, I would say not filling them out, period. I want to say digitally, because we do still take paper applications.
Okay.
And I don't know, because I say 85% of students that are on the negative list technically are paid. I don't know what percentage of those maybe just didn't bother, would they really qualify? I don't know that. And I
Okay.
can't make them fill out an application. We can offer it and those kinds of things.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
Ms. Lawrence, I do want to ask one question. I'm not sure this. I've texted Chief Boodle, but he may not see the message. But do we now have the capability in Infinite Campus to collect the free and reduced lunch information? I'm not sure if we can or not, but do you guys know?
I don't know, but we use a separate system from a company called Heartland. And how it works is we pre-scan in and enter all the information, and when it comes into us, it can read what the parent, whether it's paper or not, and it compares it for us. So it's not, they're both great systems, if that makes sense. I've used Infinite Campus. They both do the same thing, I guess is what I'm saying.
Did you have?
I'm sorry, one more question. On the form itself, is it visible from the main website?
I would have to check.
I would just suggest
I'm-
that it's,
I'm not sure. I think
Like-
I'm not sure how many clicks it is to get, but if it needs to be quicker, I'm sure we can talk to communications about moving it quicker. And
Okay.
then we do send out flyers and QR codes and all those kind of things as
Okay.
well.
It's on the website. There's school nutrition. When you click on that, it says free reduced meals. All those are on that page.
okay, thank you.
It's also proactively sent to all families multiple times per year.
Ms. Edmonds?
Thank you. I have several questions, but I am watching the time, so I'll be quick. So the form, do we have control over that form? Could we edit it
Some of
at
it.
all? Okay.
I edited a little bit, but I can't edit the whole thing, if that makes sense.
Sure. I mean, I would
I
imagine
have,
it's
I'm required to have certain parts on there,
Sure.
discrimination statement, all these different things.
Okay.
And that's why you see so many words on one page, because I'm trying to figure out how to piece together everything that's required.
Thank you. And I'm not looking for you to answer this, but I am a little, it's difficult for me to hear what I feel like you're saying of who's using up these funds or who's not paying, because we know that, cost of living has gone up, cost of insurance has gone up, and so I'm hesitant for us to, I'd be very interested to hear how you're making that determination, but not right this minute.
Okay.
I'm just putting out there that I've got a lot of concern about how you know that. Clearly, we can't, philanthropy our way out of it. I was thinking just beyond the angel funds, and it was mentioned that we do have the zero waste, but those are not hardly in even a quarter of our schools, let alone all of them. And some schools have food pantries that are run by the students, or community groups. We've got backpack buddies, so we have all of this, and yet, we need our state and federal governments to adopt universal school meals, period. I know that's not within our purview. But I did want to raise that this has been something that our commissioners have traditionally really supported us on. I know when Matt Calabria was on the board, he and Jessica Holmes, Commissioner Holmes, worked really hard to get some universal breakfast at some of our schools. So I just think we need to, raise community awareness in addition with our commissioners, and I don't, perhaps just maybe encourage that conversation for them as well. And then I really appreciate, Chair Haggerty, what you said. I think this is a basic human right. And I really don't care who's trying to eat at school. If we've got kids that want a school meal, they should get one. And so I think I'm in favor. The money does have to come from somewhere, but this is a basic human right, and we should find the money, as hard as that will be, because I know it's not just sitting out there somewhere. I understand it will come from some other line item, but I think that it's just the right thing to do. Thank you.
So I know that we are at time, but I guess it's the will of the board to continue as currently. And if you all can bring an update at the end of the year to let us know, I think that would be where we are. And if folks are interested in participating and helping, I think that works. But thank you for bringing this to us. And we will now go to our recommendation to turn year-round schools into, changing the date for year-round schools to be consistent with our traditional schools of being a teacher workday. So welcome Mr. Carosa and Ms. Anderson-Powell.
You want to go first?
So we are recommending to add a day out for students on March 3rd, 2026, which would, number one, align with all other calendars which are out that day. It's an election day. As you know, we make calendars 2 years in advance. When we made this calendar, we did not have options for remote instruction, and we were having to do EOG, test readministration, at the end of the year. So we had put 2 bank days at the end of the year for that. So given 6 bank days in total, that taking 2 away only left 4 for year-round. So that year, that committee opted not to put a teacher workday on March 3rd. However, now that we have remote instruction options and we don't have to do readministration after the school year, so we can look at something different. So now we're recommending March 3rd be closed for students. It still would be a day of work for teachers to align with all of the other calendars in the district.
Great. Thank you for bringing this to us. I know it was, I wouldn't say last minute, but I think we were able to jump on this as quickly due to some emails from families who have kids in year-round and trying to be consistent, and also being mindful of the safety concerns with having some of our schools being utilized for election days, and so we want to be mindful of that. So I see Ms. Edmonds' hand, so I'll recognize you, Ms. Edmonds.
Thank you so much. Just when I saw this on the agenda, I just was thinking, okay, here we are with all this buzz about a winter storm that's coming this weekend that could potentially, impact. But your point about the remote learning days, which we save till the very last possible, I I'm sure you've thought about this also, so can you affirm that you are not worried about the need for weather-banked?
I'm always worried. I'm
always
going
worried
to
about
New
the
York, and I'm always worried about options for weather makeup, especially for year-round, because when we run out of options, we look at Saturdays to make that instructional time up, and we certainly want to avoid that. Last Friday, I wasn't worried. Today, I'm a little more worried with the impending weather. But I think with the use of, I think there are a couple of tracks that still have 3 bank days. I think one has 1 bank day, but with the remote instruction, hopefully that will balance out. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, historically, multi-track year-round has had the least amount of bank time available. So while we talk about bank days, there are several other, banked hours that we could translate into a particular day. But, the weather it has been the last several years, it's been tough to predict.
And the state does provide us to have at least 5 days of remote learning, and traditionally, the district has not done that since the pandemic, so we do have those options as well, so we don't have to utilize, Saturday schools or whatnot. So this item will be on the agenda for action because we're making a change, and I think as we move forward, we haven't done the 28 count. We have done the 28.
No, we have done the 27, we have done the 26, 27 year-round. I will be bringing that back because we no longer need those bank days at the end.
Okay.
And then I will be bringing 26, 27 early college calendars because we have not approved those.
Okay.
And then I will bring 27, 28, oh my God, traditional, modified, and year-round. All of those will come end of February, beginning of March.
Okay. And if there's ways so we don't have to keep, modifying and calendars, if we could utilize when we know that there's primaries and general elections and our Board of Elections are utilizing our schools, just so we're being consistent, if we can bank those days in there to the best of our ability.
And now that we have more opportunities, we can do that moving forward on year-round.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions or concerns? All right. Thank you, and we look forward to this being on the action item.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So our last item on the agenda is not on your agenda, but I had a note to remember this. Dr. Taylor is going to share with us about the Council of Great City Schools.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the opportunity to just quickly share with the board. As we move forward, we are going to be engaging with the Council of Great City Schools. As you know, we are the 14th largest district in the nation, but one of the issues that we face is when we meet with districts within the state, we are not necessarily having the same kind of issues and problems. At this point, Wake County, Mecklenburg County is the only one that's of comparable size to Wake County. And so this will give us access to a network of urban leaders that deal with problems that are similar to ours. Also, those experts that deal with policy issues and legislation and regulations, many of the things that we're dealing with as a large and growing district. There's also some technical assistance that they can give to school boards in the work that you do, and certainly the leadership support for the school district and the opportunity to engage in job-alike positions where our staff can be able to engage with them. And so if I think about a person who administers a large program here, they may not necessarily have the same issues as someone who is in a Washington County or a, or Jones County. And so just wanted to share that with the board, that we've done considerable vetting with this organization. And there are actually a number of other districts in the state that are a part. So just wanted to share that with you, and we will be bringing back additional information as we increase the engagement. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the board? All right, I'm looking at the time. We have 8 minutes. I'm wondering, is it?
No, we don't have time.
So we'll just stand adjourned until, we'll call the work session, we'll end the work session, and we'll stand adjourned until the 5:30 meeting. Thank you.